All right, welcome to the return of the Benzo Boys. The Benzo Boys are back in town. This is the Benzo Rehab Dungeon, episode 49. It is the 9th of July. I am joined, I am the host, Michael Deebs. I am joined by co-host, gentleman, scholar, at Danko
Did you forget my name?
Danko Suvin from the Instagram handle at Danko. I did blank on your name for a moment. And I'm also joined by John, the producer, who is the Instagram handle at Discopathic. John, have you actually uploaded anything to that Instagram yet?
No, I have not.
Someone's gonna follow you anyways. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I follow him. I love his posting.
I do too. Yeah, I love his one post. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Cool. So we've been gone for 2 weeks. I'm rusty, obviously. You know.
And I'm refreshed.
Oh. John, how have you been the last 2 weeks? Just summarize all the events that happened in your life for the last 2 weeks for us, real quick.
Well, I'm not sure. Because, I've been losing time, I think, over these last 2 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, you're me now.
Yeah. The only thing I am sure of is that it has been 2 weeks.
Can you be sure about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't because I just keep, waking up, doing things, shopping, but in somebody else's clothes.
Oh, man. That's
always thinking of this, too. It's just it's really weird.
When you said that you were losing...
all of us.
Yeah. When you said that you were losing time, I was like, "Oh man, is like the podcast the only stable thing in John's life? Like, is the podcast the metronome of John's like I guess musical? I don't know.
Yeah, like I don't know. I'm not sure if I've gone to work.
Well, that sounds confusing. I don't think we have time to get into all that's going on with you. Danko, how have you been?
I'm fine, man. Keep thinking about wolves.
Oh, interesting.
Just wolves. Just thinking about dreaming about wolves and trees.
Dreaming and thinking about wolves. We should get someone to psychoanalyze you.
Yeah. Also, so here's a weird one. My stomach keeps disappearing and then reappearing in my body. And then
my body.
and I have a feeling that it has nothing to do with the fact that my father, when I was a child, used to build like S&M machines to make me more polite.
Oh,
I know it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. I would guarantee it has very little to do with what seems like traumatic's not the word I'm looking for. Normal.
No.
Seems normal.
And we will get deeper into that, right? Is that our plan?
I think so. I think we're going to get pretty deep inside a lot of things here. Really work our way into the guts, the machinery of the topic, which we promised we would return with, which is psychoanalysis, which I learned recently is not being crazy about anal sex.
No, I mean it could be. It could be.
Yeah.
If in case anyone missed it, and obviously no one missed the reference, but Judge Schraber is who I was talking about when it comes to the BDSM equipment and the organs disappearing and stuff like that. And he did have an anus obsession. So I mean. Maybe.
Yeah, it's just not a requirement, I think. Is what I was getting at.
Right. Yeah, the psychoanal is only a phase, but it's not the entirety of psychoanalysis.
So right before we started recording, for the viewer, this image that just appeared on your screen is a picture of Freud, just having a good time with some wolves.
Oh yeah.
Um,
One or several.
one or
Of
several.
those little guys. That's another reference.
That is another
in
reference.
case people didn't notice it. That's also. I mean, yeah, that one's been memed to death. Actually, that's the thing, is that I'm at this point in time, I think the people that don't actually know what the reference is are more responsive to that reference than not.
I would venture to guess that that's true.
Yeah.
So you've laid out a discussion plan, I guess.
A little bit.
Without further ado, I suppose we just toss you right into it.
Right. So the kind of what I wanted to talk about, or ramble about, or something, is the connection between something like a Marxist critique and psychoanalysis, or maybe a Marxist critique of psychoanalysis,
Sure.
or something like that.
Right.
So a little adventure there. The first question I guess we have to cover is, what is psychoanalysis, if not, in fact, an obsession with butts, right? And it's not just an obsession with phalluses either. It is, in short, and I think this will require a little bit of explanation for some people anyway, but it is, in short, the process of making sense of or controlling the id, or taking the id and reconciling it with the ego.
Sure.
What those terms are, it's very easy. There are really three very important terms to keep in mind with psychoanalysis, at least in this kind of setting. So the id is it's all of the parts of your thought that you don't consciously think, right? It's this messy goop of impulses and energies and wants and desires, or like pre-wants and pre-desires, that are predicated on earlier experience, that inform the ego. And the ego is more or less what it sounds like. It's your conscious mind. It's your conscious personality. And then you have the superego, which is kind of more or less your like the angel on your shoulder. It's not always moral per se.
Kind of the idealized self, I guess, right?
Yeah. Depending on who you're reading, I mean, Lacan definitely, he refers to it as like the ego ideal, or the ideal I, which obviously is very much kind of what you're saying, in line with that. But the superego can be a little bit more than just your ideal self. Also,
well, maybe
right?
like the imagination of yourself, right?
Yeah, well, the superego is also, I mean, it all connects to it. Maybe these are kind of purposeless nuances here, but the superego is something that's very strong in, say, someone that's like religious, or theoretically would be, because it's governing, it's a non-unconscious governance of the person's actions.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of that has to do with you projecting yourself upon it, but some of it is probably independent of those projections. So yeah, it's so the first real issue that we see when it comes to psychoanalysis and this model of the consciousness is when we come into kind of a Marxist or capitalist sense, is the fact that this immediately ends up making it produces this thought that the unconscious is this non-productive thing that can only be kind of believed and managed, right? So the unconscious, the id, is just this goop that causes problems in your life and produces your desires and things like that. And the only things to be done with that are to reconcile it with the ego, to make sense of it, so that you can live a healthier, more productive life, right? You can fit in, you can deal with your issues by controlling them. And at bottom, that's the purpose of the psychoanalyst analysand kind of relationship. Is the psychoanalyst, he comes in like a cut, right? the psychoanalyst injects himself into the kind of conscious framework of the analysand, and exists as this empty space between the ego and the id, or between the superego and the ego, or anywhere in this, so that they can help mediate and make sense and organize things, so that the ego can have control over this. But the issue with this, it goes back to what I just said, which is that belief in management thing, right? The management thing, I think, is really clear, right? Which is that if all your intentions with a psychoanalytic treatment are to control things, that's going to fit very neatly into systems of control, like the workplace, or the penal systems, or anything like that.
Right.
But the belief is also a really big part of it, because and I'll kind of get into this with further discussion when I get into kind of Marxism a little bit more. But when you are dealing with a system of representation where someone is telling you, well, I have dreams about wolves, right? The psychoanalyst is going to already project their belief and their understanding of the world, which is predicated on not just their ids, like the psychoanalyst would believe, or their superegos, but more complex machineries of the social environment, right?
Yeah.
And so all that happens is that through psychoanalysis, someone comes up to you and says, my God, I'm really suffering. These wolf dreams drive me crazy. I want to kill my dad and sleep with my mom. What can you do for me? And then the psychoanalyst...
You've been Oedipalized, son.
You've been Oedipalized. And the psychoanalyst just ends up saying, well, here is how we can align you better with the larger social fabric, independent of the fact that it is by nature the social fabric that has something to do with those problems arising in the first place.
Of course.
And so this is all a circuitous route of belief, compounding belief, and really mostly making things worse a lot of the time. And when it doesn't make things worse, it just projects this kind of totalitarianism upon it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is an innately totalitarian view of the individual, is that they must be controlled, they must control themselves. The self is controlled through being integrated with an authority figure. The authority figure is also dependent upon their own authorities, and it's just this line that goes all the way to God, right? The same great chain of being kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I was just about to bring that up. So
right.
So on the subject of
please.
wolves, real quick, we brought it up a couple of times without really getting into it, and I think we probably have some listeners and viewers that maybe don't get the reference.
Yeah.
If we could go into that briefly, basically, Freud has this patient who has
the Wolfman.
Yeah, the Wolfman, and he has visions and nightmares of wolves all the time, and he looks out the window at night and sees wolves in the trees, and et cetera, et cetera. Freud basically goes down this line of reasoning that's like, at one point as a young man, this patient stumbled in on his parents having sex like doggy style, and so
Tergo,
Tergo, in the style of the dog, if you will. And he had a very strict teacher that was his last name was Wolf, and
yep.
And there was a third one, wasn't there?
It's just further projection onto the father. It's all wolves.
Yeah. And so Freud goes into this saying, well, you don't like wolves, or you're terrified of wolves, and they're appearing to you in this way because you've had bad experiences with vaguely dog-like things, which is obviously like kind of just bullshit.
Of course, and that's there's a famous essay in the works of Deleuze and Guattari, which is one or several wolves.
And that's in A Thousand Plateaus, correct?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
And it essentially is just saying, hey, the problem here is that this is too unificatory, right?
Right.
Which is it's too dependent upon saying that all of these wolf things are dependent on one another and informing one another. There is this popular conception in psychoanalysis, largely inside of like Lacanian psychoanalysis, which is that things are part of the signifying chain, right?
Mhm.
Which is that every experience that you have is predicated upon previous experiences, and that is what will end up informing your belief system. And I think that that is so close to being true, but the problem is that it's, of course, linear, right? It
Yeah.
is absolutely one directional. And of course, each of your experiences can redefine your past experiences and go into this loop. But on top of that, you also have countless experiences of other people having experiences of other people having experiences that all kind of bleed together into this larger kind of machinery. I mean, Deleuze and Guattari are, very interested in referring to things as machines, and one of the reasons is actually because of this Judge Schreiber stuff that we'll talk about later. But that everything is reaching from the molar to the molecular. Everything is larger machines made up of smaller machines, and the functioning of the larger machines is predicated upon all the functionings of the miniature machines. And that's actually a really great metaphor for taking apart the psychoanalytic model, because if you look at the ego or the psyche as a whole as a machine, and say that we need to make the id act like the ego, you're saying that something to the tune of, I need my car to act like the carburetor, or I need the carburetor to act like the car, rather.
Sure,
right?
right.
And it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's totally nonsense. And so there's no way to unify all the parts of the consciousness into the ego in a sensible way. Even there's that common refrain with like Deleuzians, especially ones that, never mind, I was about to start shitting on people, but which is, make yourself a body without organs. And what does that mean? It just means to turn yourself into something like a pure potential, which is, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that. But when we're talking about organs, we're talking about each of these things that have their own defined roles. But these defined roles are ultimately arbitrary and dependent upon like a larger machinery as well as a smaller machinery. When you make yourself into a body without organs or body without organization, you're able to escape these kind of predefined notions of what any one machine is supposed to do and how they're supposed to relate. And so it's really the opposite of this Freudian psychoanalysis kind of sense. It's saying we should actually be more like the id in some ways, where desire becomes productive rather than something that is chained up by production.
And you had mentioned it earlier that psychoanalysis is, it's attempting to rationalize the mind, I guess, in such a way that it can produce, and literally that does mean production in a lot of senses, because obviously somebody who's in a psych ward or something like that can't produce for the capital machine, right?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I mean, there's a reason that, obviously on top of the fact that life can be really miserable, there's a reason that the most commonly prescribed drugs that we have are for things like attention deficits and depression.
Adderall, right.
Because they make you more efficient. They make you
and it's
producing.
It's remarkable how many people I know who work in maybe jobs where they have to be like kind of analytical all day, or not even necessarily analytical, but just focused on something. And I know so many people who specifically take Adderall just so that they can function better at their job.
I did it in college.
Yeah, no, lots. So many people do it. They do it in college. They do it in work. It's incredible, and it's literally dosing your mind to go ahead. Sorry, what?
No. Sorry, I was just saying. Think of how many people drink coffee.
Yeah, no.
It's the miniature version of that.
Right? Don't talk to me until I've had my Adderall and coffee.
Right. And it's you always end up saying that the application of that, of course, in like a business or like a cubicle environment, right? Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, because you have to go to work and there's
so
something you want to do.
the argument that I'm trying to make is my job should let me drink at work because I shouldn't have to dose my mind in order to be more focused and productive at work. I should be able to get a little bit drunk, get a little bit sloppy, and just kind of do whatever I want.
Right. So
anyways, we can cut the podcast off there. We've made our point.
Conclusion found. I mean, that kind of joke there is actually really good, and because I think it clears something up, which is that like a lot of, I think we're going to spend a good amount of time here, especially later, kind of talking about the problem with a lot of like baby Marxists and like baby anarchists and stuff like that, which
Sure.
which is this one of the problems that I notice a lot of the time is this either it's an obsession that reaches in one direction or the other. Either work is innately immoral, which is the dumbest fucking take in the universe. Like no one should ever have to work. And it's like that, number one, that doesn't work. I'm sorry, we can't have the gay space communism. It's just not going to happen.
Fully automated.
Maybe. Well, right. That's the important part. Fully automated. And maybe one day. And like that's kind of the goal of is like eventually automating everything that we can, and then everyone can like sit back and have a drink or whatever. But that's just not the reality. Work is important. But then the other end of it, with a lot of folks that I know, is that only people that are in the most like stereotypically work-oriented work are the people with any kind of value, and that's like obviously not true either. We can't all be coal miners and construction workers. Granted, these people are extremely important and they should exist, right? And we rely on them entirely. But I feel like people really kind of, once they become a real leftist or consider themselves a real leftist, they pick one or the other, and it's all fucking nonsense.
And we should also, point out that not everybody can work, and any sort of ethical, moral society should include some amount of excess for people who may not be able to work. And
there's
you can't just like we can't become like Spartan Marxists kicking the deformed babies off the cliff because we don't think that they're going to be able to produce for the state, which is like I don't think that's better than capitalism in any way whatsoever.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, there's that famous phrase, and famous for a reason because it works on a foundational level, which is from each according to their ability to each according to their need, right?
Yeah.
And that is how it should work.
I just imagine like Karl Marx, and you've seen the movie 300.
Yeah.
And like Karl Marx and like one of those leather strap things that they wear in 300 with his red cloak. He's like walking up to Ephialtes, the deformed guy, and he's like, "Raise your shield." and the deformed, leftists can't raise their shields, so he won't allow them to fight with them. Right. You see, the phalanx is the most important part of the Marxist structure. Sorry. Anyways, go on.
No, I mean,
this is like, tangential.
but yeah. I mean, that's the really important thing is understanding that labor is extremely important, and it's extremely important so that we can do things that aren't labor, right?
Yeah,
so we can continue to survive and continue to live like fulfilling lives. So you need to necessarily have both. Sorry guys, shit is nuanced. You can't like necessarily grid everything out. It sucks. But the other thing, I might as well just bring it up now since we're already on this topic. But the other issue that anyone who's ever walked into a leftist space, sorry for saying that, bodies and spaces, right? The problem that anyone has ever who's ever entered into one of these has noticed is the argument between identity of some sort and like a class reduction.
Yeah,
right.
I have been kicked out of every left book that's leftists on Facebook space, I think, because I mean we'll probably talk about it. Yes, identity is important to some degree, but also class is the binding thing for all of us.
And yeah, I mean that's the thing, John. I made a meme about this earlier, but would you be able to, dear producer friend, look up the PDF of the Critique of the Gotha program, and not the foreword, but read the first sentence of the work proper, because I feel like that's very, very important for us going forward with this. Sorry, I should have had like this loaded up to
No,
send.
no, it's okay. We can you just have some dead air in here.
Dead air. I love dead air, man. Let's
I'm
you
over
breathe.
here.
See, you got to labor and you got to relax.
Yeah, I mean, on the subject, it's like there's a little bit of both in like labor being important, and also like we shouldn't have to work really, and the
Right.
balance there is that like if we produced to fulfill needs rather than produce to fulfill excess, we could drastically reduce our working hours, and you would get your ability to like most of your time is just fuck off, do whatever I want time, and then you have like maybe 20 hours or less that you work in a week.
Right, exactly, and that, it's so funny looking at early 20th century like articles talking about the future of labor and stuff like that, or 19th century even, and it's like, oh man, in the year 1967, we're all going to be working 10 hours a week. We're all going to make $20,000 a year, and it's going to be awesome. Like, no, that's not. And yeah, John, when I say that, like the chapter 1, the sentence starts with labor is. See what I'm talking about? Otherwise, I can just read it. I don't. I'm not trying to like order you around.
No, it's okay. John's been quiet this whole time, and we have to.
Yeah, I just wanted to give him an opportunity to hang out.
There you go. You found it.
Cool.
There you go.
Is it up on the screen?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Oh.
Labor is the source of wealth in all culture.
Working for you?
I don't know.
Not even paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay. So
labor. Go ahead.
It starts with labor is not, right?
Oh, labor is not the source of all wealth. Nature is just as much the source of use values, and it is surely of such that material wealth consists, as labor, which itself is only the manifestation of a force of nature, human labor power.
Great. So, I mean, it goes further into this as well, but I mean, independent of even nature, there's also like the cultural element, right? Labor is not the source of all wealth, and it is not the source of all culture. The quote that he's responding to is from the kind of the manifesto of the Goethe program,
right.
Which said labor is the source of all wealth and all culture. And then he's like, no, the first line in his critique of it is, it is not. So we can't all be class reductionists who say it is only ever labor that matters, but we also necessarily, as people that like believe in the labor theory, say that, well, that is what produces surplus value, right? That's what produces surplus value. Labor, and it's also not the only thing that produces culture. Like, obviously, that's
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, all that labor does is extract the wealth from nature, right?
Right.
And yeah, so labor is the only thing that can produce surplus value, because it's adding on to that and extracting from the baseline of nature. Everything that we produce through labor has some natural component to it. It has to be, whether it's a mineral or lumber, or fucking sheep that you're
sheep is the important one, right? That's the example Marx always uses, which
is like, that's why I brought it
up. Right like what's up?
Europe, well, and I mean, Europe has had like animal stock reserves at times, haven't they?
Right.
Like regulated and controlled by the government.
Yeah, and then I mean, one of the most famous examples of where capitalism comes from is, and I mean, I'm not sure how much of this has to do with the livestock itself, though I'm pretty sure that there's a little bit of bleed, but we're talking about the production of enclosures upon the commons, and the commons were just spaces where everyone's animals could feed. Right. So this is all kind of connected. But I mean, the example that Marx is always talking about, the really famous one, is, I mean, how much does a spool of yarn cost? And then it ends up, increasing because more and more labor value is applied to it as you do things like turn it into coats.
Yeah.
So yeah, the wool on a sheep is not equal to the value of it once it is a coat, because it goes through like all these different steps. There's the value of machinery, there's the value of or the labor value that is imbued in the machinery because people had to build the machines and all this shit. It just ends up, it all builds up, and then suddenly this coat is worth a huge amount of money. And then there's a lot of like cultural, and like there's the like Veblen good kind of stuff, or like rarity, whatever. This is kind of on a different subject, but so when it comes to culture in the mind, this all does come back to psychoanalysis. But some other stuff for people to know that are really new into this is that in larger Marxist theory, when we come into spaces like Althusser and Gramsci and people of the sort, and Marx writes about this as well, like this is not new, or some of this, but the world is not necessarily all reduced entirely to labor and the relations of labor, right? That is the base. It's the means and the relations of production. That is the base. It's what ends up defining culture in a lot of ways, but culture is also the thing that ends up defining and re-regulating the base. So we have culture as the superstructure that includes things like governmentality, education, I mean, all sorts of just human shit, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
kind of like
kind of like a feedback loop sort of scenario.
Exactly.
Because labor is required to make this culture, and then culture dictates the labor, and that just pisses and shits back and forth forever.
Exactly it pisses and shits back and forth forever.
I have a way with words, I've been told.
there's this comedy film. I don't remember anything else from it, but I forget what it is. I have to find a clip from this, but there's like these kids that are trying to screw with someone on like a dating site or something like that, and the person ends up saying like, tell me something really hot, and then they send them this story back about like, I want my butt against your butt, and then I want to poop back and forth forever. And they're like, that is so hot, and it turns into this whole thing. So yeah, the butts pooping back and forth forever is actually a more accurate description than the human centipede kind of thing that we usually think about when it comes to
it sounds like a South Park thing.
It does sound like a South Park thing. Yeah. But this was a live action movie. I gotta find what it is. Totally sounds like a South Park thing. But yeah, so base and superstructure. It is a feedback loop. They do inform one another. And this is also what is occurring inside of like the psychoanalytic framework, right? Both in the sense that you can metaphorize this, where you have the id informs the ego defines, the externality, and then someone else's externality informs yours, which informs your id, and it all loops back and forth. But also is the issue of, I'm sorry to say it, and I'm sure no one has heard this before, but we live in a society.
Oh, fuck.
We live in a society.
Get the clown paint.
And so psychoanalysis really ends up falling short, because psychoanalysis is, ironically, inherently liberalized, even though it's totalitarian and focused on a larger kind of community that will define value. It ignores the fact that the larger community is defining value. It ignores that entirely, because that would make psychoanalysis somewhat subjective, and ends up saying, well, each individual fixing their shit is how this needs to work. That's what I mean.
I was going to say, and what you mean, what you mean by liberalized is that it's individualistic.
Right. Individualistic, but also totalitarian, right? So it's very neoliberal in a funny way. It's like this, it has this pre-conscious,
like almost the exact definition of neoliberalism.
Right.
What were you saying, John? Go ahead.
Just one of those incrementalist, slightly more humane steps.
Right. Yeah, no, it totally is. I mean, it's either lobotomies or it's well, I mean, both are happening at the same time, actually. But
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a little
but
bit.
I guess that makes it an either or. It
well,
does make it an either
actually,
or. But
aren't people talking about bringing back lobotomies?
I want one.
Yeah,
Dude.
I mean, I would love to have one. Same.
Yeah. Let's see.
You know, what's really funny is that it's mostly of all the people that I talk to that bring up wanting to have a lobotomy, it's mostly women that tell me they want one. And maybe it's because I'm unbearable to talk to, and
Yeah,
so
that's
women want
absolutely,
lobotomies when they're talking to me. But
Do you think
yeah,
it's me or them? Me or them?
it couldn't possibly be me. It's all women are the same.
I'm the only consistent feature in this, but I think it might be them.
But no, I think there might be something to that. I think there might be something here. But yeah. Anyway, so the real problem of psychoanalysis here in this Marxian lens is that you are necessarily projecting use value onto each individual, and then labor value actually ends up kind of dissolving in this, right? Which is, well, not dissolving into it, it ends up being obscured and then extracted. You have to become useful. You have to be able to like help us all out. Right. And we're going to do this to perhaps your detriment, because the other option is something like schizoanalysis, which is this kind of ecstasy is the wrong word to use, but I'm kind of like a battalion, so I almost need to use that word. But it's this need for desire to work itself out, right? That the id will make sense of itself by continuing on its own path. And of course, I'm not like other Deleuzians, but I'm not absolutely anti-psychiatry. I think that it's problematic to be that way. And, like if you have really severe schizophrenia or something, that's not like a socially induced illness. There are genetic components of this. There's all sorts of shit. And even if you are like, even if it is stress induced or socially induced, that doesn't really matter either once you end up suffering the symptoms. So certain mental conditions do require genuine treatment. And maybe if we did live in a different kind of social situation, that wouldn't so much be the case. Like if we were living in some, far away, both in the past and geographically space, where we saw schizophrenics as like soothsayers or something, would be different. But even that, I think, is somewhat apocryphal from what I've read. Right.
No, yeah, and that I don't, I don't think that's useful either.
But there is something valuable about desire for desire's sake, and living in a way that isn't obsessed with the production of surplus value, right?
Without a doubt, yeah.
Creativity in any like totally logical robot Jordan Peterson follower kind of way, or maybe not Jordan Peterson, because all of his followers are actually like hysterics anyway, but in like a Ben Shapiro logic, Ben Shapiro logic kind of way, which is also not the case, but I'm not going to fix this again. There is no reason for poetry, right? There's no reason for, I mean, the thing that preoccupies Freud with all this shit is that he's so confused and curious about, like, hold on, if the purpose of a human body is to make more human bodies, then why don't I just put penis in vagina and then deposit fluid? Like, why is that not what
why
sex
am I doing
is?
other things?
Yeah, why do people have fetishes? Why do we fuck for longer than 10 seconds? Oh, like why are there homosexuals? Why do all these things exist? Because human reality isn't about like the most basic efficiency. It's about these wider, I mean, the human consciousness, at least. It's about these desires that are constantly working themselves out based upon these wider fabrics and machineries that end up informing one another. Human sexuality is extremely fluid and complex because human society is extremely fluid and complex.
Yeah, and Freud, I would say, is probably like the progenitor of the incel like sort of mindset in this way, right? Like,
What do you mean?
well, because like he's confused why we do other things than fuck to make
Well,
babies,
yeah,
and
like
when incels are talking, they're like, oh, the only reason I have a
Oh, okay.
job is because I need to have enough money to get the girl so that I can fuck and
I mean, let's be clear.
yeah.
Freud is not one of these Evo psych losers either. He's like kind of on the opposite end. As stuffy and like stupid, that's not stupid, but as stuffy and like bizarre and phallocentric and shitty as Freud can be in so many ways, he is still ultimately looking at things and saying like, no, the very like strict I make money so I can sex kind of thing is still like a reduction and not quite right. I mean, he does reduce everything to sexual and like libidinous energies, but I would ultimately agree with him, right? Is that, biological organisms function to be biological organisms, but that things are really complex because everything's in relation to everything else. So, I mean, it becomes way crazier than that and actually way cooler than all that, too, because then you get to do things like the tantric sex that Sting has. That was a weird deep cut joke.
yeah,
Like the 90s, I think.
that was out there, man.
Um, but yeah, yeah, and so there's a little bit more that I kind of want to touch on with this, but that's really like that's the basic floor of all this stuff, right? But the problem kind of returns when we are talking about something like psychoanalysis, not just in the sense that it's got bad subconscious motivations, you could call them, right? It's not just because it's totalitarian. It's not just because it's like maybe immoral or amoral or capitalistic or anything like that. Like, that's not why there are problems with it necessarily. It also doesn't quite make sense. And I'm not blowing anyone's mind by saying that psychoanalysis doesn't always make sense, right? Like, I don't think that, yeah, I don't think any one of us wants to kill our dads and fuck our moms. I don't think that's, at least no one in this chat. Some people
Actually,
do.
Yeah.
Show of hands. Who wants to kill their dad and fuck their mom?
Certainly not both, right? Like maybe one. But
no,
it
has to be both.
It's got to be both.
And if you're feeling one, then you're feeling the other.
That's true.
It's a necessity.
Yeah, you can only feel aggression towards authorities if you want to, like, take from them.
Well, that's actually why I hate Joe Biden so much, is because I want to
fuck.
I can't say that I want to do bad things to Joe Biden.
Oh, that's true. That's illegal.
He's the president now. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck. Just say something that's not like a threat per se. You want to give like an aggressive massage.
I want to cuck Joe Biden.
And maybe he'd like it, so that doesn't count.
Fair enough.
Yeah. You know what?
He's probably into it. I know Hunter Biden would be into it.
That's true.
I wish that I could be in a position to personally mock Joe Biden's lack of the ability to get an erection.
That's true. Yeah. I know he's on a lot of meds, dude. He might have one just like pumping all the time.
He's like 80.
Yeah.
Nah, he's got that he's got that secret government Viagra.
Yeah. That guy boofs like 20 grams of kratom every time he like talks to his wife. He's just got like green powder flowing out of his ass, like clouds of it.
Listen here. Listen here, you horse-faced
that's him talking to his lover.
I mean, have you seen the way he talks to other people?
That's fair. Like just sniffing your hair as he says that. Yeah. But
let's move on.
Representation is a problem. Representation is a problem.
Sure.
But what I mean by representation isn't like an idpol representation in this sense, right?
No, I mean symbolic representation, right?
Pretty much. And by symbolic representation, I really mean like phenomenological representation. I mean, any kind of depiction of anything.
Yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of reasons that representation is tricky, right? Not the least of which is that phenomena noumena issue where it's not just it's not just the issue that like we don't actually have any access to the noumenal world. That's not necessarily it. But it's also maybe the simplest way of putting it, avoiding just well, everything is actually very complicated, we live in a society, is this problem where representation has inbuilt lag. And I think that's something people kind of forget about, even though they metaphorize it all the time. So people, I guess the metaphor of it would be a game of telephone, right? Yeah. Where you depict something and you depict it wrong, and then even if you depict it perfectly well, the person listening to you gets a little bit wrong, and those things kind of carry on. But this applies to everything. It even applies to the physical world. I mean, the only reason that genetic evolution functions is because representation, even on the genetic level, has lag to it. It misrepresents itself with iteration. And so the same thing occurs with any kind of communication. And so when you're dealing with something like a cultural norm, or even dealing with your own psyche, trying to produce something out of experience or out of the unconscious or out of, something that someone told you to do, shit gets complicated. Things are represented wrong. And so when you're dealing with the psychoanalyst analyzand situation, you have someone who is essentially the totalitarian mind of society, who is listening to your dreams or something like it, and you misrepresent your dreams to someone who mishears your dreams, who then misrepresents them back to you, and then you misrepresent that representation while trying to internalize it and make sense of it. And so it will always be wrong. I mean, look at any one of Freud's, or even Lacan's, but primarily Freud's. His is the most heinous. His what would you call them? His like reports, right? Like Dora is one of the most terrifying ones, where like she was terribly abused, and then his reading of it in the end was, well, you're scared and sad and want to die and can't speak at times because you thought you wanted to be abused, right? And it's like, that's I don't know if that's it, Chief.
Probably not.
That's probably wrong. Yeah, and then like with the Wolfman, that crazy jump that he makes, where it's like, oh, okay, the wolves in the tree.
Yeah.
That's your dad. That's your dad fucking your mom, and also it's your
Doggy
music
style.
teacher, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Evo psych thing would have been more satisfying, where it's just like you're afraid of wolves because wolves might eat you, right? And they're up there, so that's a position you don't want them in. Sorry, go on.
No, that's all good. I think when I was thinking about this subject and stuff, one of the things that I was, and I don't know if there's a more professional theory term for this, but the purity of like what something is, and so you have the idea of a wolf, and to Freud the wolf always means one thing, and it can't mean something different to a different person, because he's saying, oh, you think about wolves, well, okay, everything that's dog or wolf related must be something that's causing these wolf apparitions to appear in your vision. Where
no, that's great. That's really important.
Where words mean completely different things to people sometimes. You might have forget what video I was watching the other day, but there was an interesting discussion on like what the word love means to different people. And love can be used in like, oh man, I really love that movie, or I really love my partner, or I really love the way that you give me sloppy toppy or whatever. And these are obviously the same word is being used in such different, and it's even in the dictionary that each word has multiple definitions of it. And so,
and even for one person, something like love can have variant
of course,
meanings,
exactly.
right?
And then,
Like,
yeah, that's exactly the kind of point I'm making is
yeah,
all these contextual differences of what one single word can mean. And we're talking like I just went through three different definitions of love over the course of 10 seconds.
yeah,
The experience of things you might feel as love, or the idea of wolves could be completely different over the span of seconds for an
right.
individual, let alone somebody who's got some kind of deep traumatic thing happening with them.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I was actually thinking about specifically that love example recently because I don't like saying that to like a lover or partner or anything like that unless I'm very certain that I mean it, and then I'll say it all the fucking time. But I was thinking about that, but I say to my friends uh that all the fucking time, or
Of
I say
course,
like
yeah.
I love pizza or whatever. Like I tell people I love you, and it means something entirely different from if I said to someone else in a different position, I love you. And even funnier is that like I'll type like ILU to like someone that I'm dating or something as like an additional comment or something, and
Right.
consider it to be something different than I love you.
Well, yeah,
Right. And
because it's
so
not spelling it out fully,
it's
so it's
it's
got
obviously
less. Yeah.
parodical in some way. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, all these things can mean different things within an individual. That's a great point. And I mean, that's the when we're talking about Deleuze and Guattari, we spoke about this a little bit during the fascism episode. But when it comes to representation, we're talking about something like that. It's the white wall and the black hole, which is, without getting really deep into it, essentially the idea is it's like a Saussurean linguistics thing, where it's similar to it, which is that the way that things have their meanings is that they are more or less within like a certain semiotic or symbolic proximity to other things, right?
Yeah.
The reason that we have fascism is because not just because someone is black while we're white, it's that black and white have like a different relationship to one another, and that there is a gradient, and that there are forms of difference between these things, and that's how we make sense of them, and thereby we're able to make the distinction, not because there are two free floating concepts which are themselves meaningful. And the only way that I myself can claim that I am white, I'm Aryan, obviously I am with my big brown red beard and my fucking whatever shitty eyes. Uh, but the only reason that I can be this cool Aryan white guy is only it's because there are Jews and
Oh man.
Roma and homosexuals and stuff around. That's the only reason that I can be this, right? And so it's all based on this comparison and relation. If everyone in the world were black, it wouldn't be a thing. It just oh, you're just everyone else. So it's all based on this kind of interrelation, which is something that psychoanalysis almost chooses to forget. Right? Is that things are built upon gradients and interrelations, even though that's like it's really funny because that's what the id really is. If you read enough psychoanalysis, is that the
Right.
id really is this interrelationship and like proximity values and stuff like that. And so psychoanalysis knows why it's wrong but refuses to admit it. Psychoanalysis itself is in denial.
Psychoanalysis is me when I'm in an argument and I'm drunk.
Yeah, right. I need
Oh
I need
fuck!
to
I know I'm wrong,
psychoanalyze
but
psychoanalysis. But yeah, so I guess I mean I said I would talk about Schreber, and I guess we can. I mean that's more funny than anything else, but otherwise, like I just have one final point, and that one final point is essentially just that the I mean it's kind of a two-part point, I guess, but psychoanalysis functions the same way that something like myth does,
yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
In that the question always remains: does the analyst and does the analysand, do they believe this or not? And the answer is invariably yeah, but not really, right? It's like when you're dealing with someone, and I am not, I'm not one of these Richard Dawkins atheist types. I'm really not. But when you're dealing with most people who have like religious belief, you always have to ask yourself, well, if they really believe that we're all going to hell, if we don't do this specific set of things, and they really do love me, why are they not like locking me in their basement and forcing me to act in a very specific way if they genuinely believe this stuff? And it's because they do and do not believe it, right? It's in a superposition, like really any kind of belief is it is and is not there by necessity of being believed. And they get shot by the cops. But which is why you do see it sometimes, right? Is that some people genuinely do it either entirely or compensatorily believe this kind of thing and will do that kind of thing. But all these different belief systems are predicated on their possibility for non-belief. Again, the black hole white wall thing comes up. But the part two of that is that in trying to capture things and define them in certain forms of belief rather than allowing desire and the functions of the psyche as a whole to function as themselves, we end up turning dreams, literally or metaphorically, into something like private property, right? It's something that can serve a certain purpose, and it's something you can pay to refine, more or less. Like, and this applies, of course, to like every time I dream about wolves fucking my dad, or my dream of wanting to be like a poet or something, right? Yeah. These all have the same kind of application where like this is nonsense and we're all going to make sense of it for you, and the only way we can make sense of it is by fitting it into a capitalistic system and thereby making private property or privating you of your own dreams. Rather than allowing them to be the abstract essence of desire, which they actually are. So yeah, that's kind of the conclusion of that. And we can talk about Schreber and laugh for a little while if we want. But
no, I think on that last point you made, I brought up like all the different connotations of like the word love and like a contextual sense. When we, you brought up poetry, and poetry obviously uses a lot of like metaphor and an analogy,
multivariance of terms, and
right, multivariance of terms and whatever. And so one of the things I would say is like, the phrase thrown to the wolves or thrown to the dogs, right?
Yeah.
Does that always mean that you're actually literally thrown to dogs? No. And so the the psychoanalytic form of like, you're scared of wolves or dogs, so it must be like a literal wolf or dog in your life of some form that you're talking about. It's
right.
And this is a point we obviously already made, but it's something else that I just kind of like thought as like an extra sort of I guess way of describing this.
Yeah.
Throwing somebody to the wolves means that like you could, or pushing somebody under a bus is a similar term, right? Like, doesn't mean that there's an actual bus. It could just mean that there's some kind of consequence and you push them under it, and that's the idiom that we use.
And actually to kind of build off of this, because I wanted to say this earlier, but we conversation happens, and I get lost because I'm an idiot. Right. But the reason that a Rorschach test exists is because you can look at one symbol and view it as a billion things, right? And it's funny that, again, like larger psychological institutions, especially like around the ages of psychoanalysis, believe that these things could function in some kind of meaningful way while still kind of abnegating or forgetting why they would necessarily apply. It's the only reason that like I love Lacan, despite being like more or less a Deleuzian or like Bataillean, and both of them have problems with him. But I really love him because the center of everything that he says is that I am also full of shit while I'm saying this. Right? He understands his own wrongness in so many ways. and honestly, he's just like hysterically funny because of that. But yeah.
Yeah, a personal anecdote on like the Rorschach test stuff. I think
Like
the
word
Rorschach.
association. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. Actually, that's exactly where I was gonna go with that.
Nice.
I remember when I was young, and I had very strong issues with depression and suicidal ideation. My parents sent me to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist did the word association sort of like test with me, sort of stuff.
That's so funny. We should
And
do that in this as a part of a podcast sometime.
all right, yeah. But yeah, I went through all the word association stuff, and the whole time I was thinking like, only a fucking moron wouldn't be able to like say, oh, the word I associate this with is happiness, or
Right.
like you could totally just make up your answers if you were like somebody with a pulse, really is all you had to be, and go like, oh, they want me to think that this word, like, what do you think of when you hear the word family? Bad, sad.
So
I'm
here's
unhappy.
the thing. Here's the thing about that, and I have thought a lot about this. Both like entering into therapy myself and just like in a general kind of scheme. But part of the test of that, I think, is that a certain kind of psychological state will also make you not care about lying, right?
Yeah,
Like if
no,
you
for
still
sure.
care about lying enough to say like that picture that I see of someone like with their, I don't know, open stomach being pissed into is actually a butterfly, then something, you're a little bit better off than the guy that's just looking at it and saying like, oh yeah, that's a axe wound being pissed into.
Is
Yeah,
the
and of
glass
course
half
with
full or half empty? The glass is
of
full of
course
piss.
it's always full of piss. I mean, and that's another one of these layers to it, which is, part of all of this stuff is just that willingness to be honest with yourself and with your analyst or whatever. But yeah, hell yeah.
Spoiler alert: the reason I was depressed is because my family was incredibly abusive.
Well, that's what you say.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
say.
probably
I guess
because
it's probably because I don't know. I saw my mom getting fucked by my stepdad.
And you thought it was
reverse cowgirl style, and
ooh,
that's why I
and that's why
don't
you have
like
dreams of cows and trees.
that's why I don't like popular country music, actually.
Every time CMT comes on, I think about CBT. It's just this whole thing.
They really ought to like. There needs to be like a universal like acronym system.
Yeah,
Like this is actually one of the few forms of governance I really believe in. Is that
because every
somebody
time
needs
that
to
I
be
sign up for CBT and
yeah.
I end up getting my balls stepped on instead of like someone telling me how to deal with my trauma better. I mean, they
Well,
both work for me.
I'm
But
actually the opposite. I'm
yeah.
looking for the stepping on thing, and I keep getting told like, "Hey, it's okay that you feel this way, but you can't act on it anymore." And I'm just like, "Lady, step on my fucking balls already." I am no longer welcome at the Lutheran church off of First Street.
Well, that's your problem. You should ask the Methodist to do it. Maybe it'll work.
Yeah, that'll probably.
I mean, the Lutherans are more willing to like step well, but the Methodists will just do it to make you happy.
Hey, deep cut religion jokes here.
But yeah, so I do want to mention the Schreiber thing really quick, which is that
Yeah, let's go into
like we
that.
said before, this man thought that his like organs were disappearing and reappearing in his body, and he had this whole like crazy solar anus kind of stuff going on, and just this fascinating kind of character. But with so Freud thinks, or sorry, that there are all sorts of different theories given up by all sorts of people in psychoanalytic communities and elsewhere about what could be wrong with this person. But if you look into his history, his father literally built like BDSM machines for kids to like make them drink soup better. Like they'd be like head straps and shit to like make your etiquette better. And so in the end, yeah, of course he lost his fucking mind. His
Right.
dad was playing like posh BDSM with him all his life. And but that's actually kind of where this D&G concept of machines comes from to some degree, because there's the interplay between Schreiber and his father. A psychoanalyst wants to think that Schreiber's father, if they are giving credit, in fact, to the machines in this whole interaction, that he's applying these machines to his son, and that the issue then is the father and the son. And in a way that is, in fact, true, but that there's this wider spectrum of things occurring where there are actually abstract machines playing upon the father, playing upon the son, playing upon the machines, and that the machine that's part of the interplay is also important, right? And so that there's this wider social field of various investments that ends up producing this relationship and the production of these Deleuze refers to it as like a sadistico-paranoiac machines, right? Which produce, again, sadistic paranoia in like a variety of different ways. So in short, the father does not coordinate machines necessarily, but is coordinated by machines and thereby coordinates them.
Yeah, because
Right.
the reason that the father is making his kids learn how to drink soup right is because there's a social construct
Exactly
telling him that this is the right, and that's why like I
torture my kids.
Yeah,
Right.
I have always hated the idea that there's like social or like structural like formal ways to like eat fucking food, like
the tortures of in and out groups. Yeah, it's
that shit, like
47 spoons.
Right, that shit annoys me so fucking much. And I grew up in like my family, there's a poor side of the family and then there's like a rich side of the family. And anytime, yeah, well, like it was very disparate,
right,
like there was a wide chasm between these two groups.
Yeah.
And anytime I ate with like the rich side of the family, I remember like being confused why we had so many spoons and forks. Like you finish with one thing, and if you don't think it'll mix with the other one, lick the fucking fork off. You're fine. And then I remember like all of them would like comment on like, oh wow, he really just goes at it, doesn't he? Like while I'm fucking eating, and then they would like almost fetishize me in some way where they're like, so Michael, what do you do for a living? And it's like, at the time I was in the Marine Corps. I don't talk to my fucking family anymore. I fucking fuck them. But at the time I was in the Marine Corps. I was like, Michael, what do you do for a living? And it's like, well, I repair circuit cards and stuff. I'm like, wow, that's very intelligent work. And like, fuck you.
Yeah, you're so well spoken.
Yeah, and the proper way for my parents to raise me would be to put me into BDSM machines so that I could learn how to eat with my rich family better and maybe be incorporated more into the wealthy side of the family.
Right.
So what I'm saying is Judge Schreiber's dad was right.
Of course. So yeah, that I guess that's really the conclusion of all of this, is that there are these relationships and these traumas are actually caused by a wider network of coordinations and like a libidinal field and traumas and things like that. And it can't necessarily all be predicated upon like, well, you saw some ants fucking when you were 4 or something. Ants, by that I mean family members, I decided.
Incestuous lesbian ants.
Oh,
hell yeah.
We all seen them. Yeah.
But yeah, that's my that worked out okay. Yeah, I forgot we were doing this until like literally a couple hours ago, so I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, well, I'd only reminded you, several times. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, you did.
I was
But
gonna
you
leave
see,
it as a joke. I
I
was gonna leave it
I
as a
have
joke.
I have a wider field of libidinous impulses guiding my life, and I don't, I can't be defined by daddy telling me I have a presentation to give.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty neat and tidy psychoanalytic overview, I think.
Hell yeah. Remember, guys, the superstructure is based, and the base is also based. And so, like,
everything's got a base.
everything's
actually.
based.
Based on base.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Bye. No, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think unless we
Yeah.
want to like tack on some. All right, here's what we'll do.
It's almost 2 hours, right? Oh,
No,
no.
we're at like
took
an
a little.
hour and 9 minutes is what we're at right
Yeah.
now.
Cool.
So next episode will be more of a regular, just kind of general news sort of thing. In the last
It
2
will
weeks,
also be
a lot of
a
stuff has happened.
little like a different day than usual, right?
Yeah,
Next week.
we'll have to figure out like which day we're gonna record on, but a lot of stuff has happened in the world over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Assassinations of presidents.
Whatever. He was a CIA op anyway.
No, yeah, I don't think it's bad that he's dead necessarily.
Right.
It's just like, ooh, that's a crazy thing.
It is
The
crazy,
ocean
yeah.
lit itself on fire, and by the ocean
Twice,
I
I think?
mean we lit it on fire.
Yeah.
What else? Joe Biden is still a nasty, rude boy.
Still farts with his mouth, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also the stuff that he's doing with like COVID-19 funding and the
No, right.
police
Yeah,
and
with the
not
teachers
teachers.
Yeah.
Which is super
And
cool.
then there's I mean, something we haven't been covering really, because it's also like because everyone else is covering it, but also it's just asinine, is all this shit that is continuing with the Trump stuff and like trying to redefine the election, which is hilarious.
Yeah, no. And,
It's so
and
funny.
that's something we should get into, I think.
Yeah, I miss talking about our orange boy, even though we never did it that much.
Yeah, no, I
He's not worth talking about, mostly.
Exactly, and that's what we always agreed upon, I think, and
right is that everyone else is already obsessing about him.
Everyone
so,
else
like,
is
we should
already
focus on the
obsessing
things
about
that
him.
maybe matter more.
Right, and
Yeah.
really like their obsession is creating something way more evil
Yeah.
than ever
Yeah,
actually exists.
exactly.
Like the Trump administration is ideologically very similar with the Obama and the Biden administrations.
Except he's actually the opposite of the ghosts in Mario, where if you look at him, he comes after you. But
Right.
if you look away,
Well, that was always the thing, right? Is like he was boisterous and he said the quiet part's loud, and this is what I always say to people is Trump always said the quiet part's loud and the loud part's incoherently. And...
right. Which is why I still like. I got into a lot of arguments about this back in November, but people were asking me who is the accelerationist candidate, and I did get into some very interesting conversations. Like I'm not going to shit on anyone for this,
no, of course,
because I think that the discussions actually were good about this. But I would always say Trump, like genuinely, just because of the fact that he's a mouthpiece for accelerationism, kind of like he encourages these points because he says the quiet parts out loud, and because he everything else is incoherent. And the quiet parts are the only parts you end up hearing then.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's great. Whereas Biden is, I mean, he's about the status quo. Like that's the whole point.
Well, he's practiced in it, right? Like he knows what he can or should, and that's actually slipping because I think he's losing his fucking mind at this point.
Right.
But
yeah.
he knows what to say out loud and what to say quietly, and he doesn't use Twitter a lot. And what's funny is, like,
which
you
is
think
to say he's the conservative candidate. But,
actually,
yeah.
Realistically and legitimately, yes.
But, I mean, depending on how you define it, yeah.
It's funny how much the national news media was relying on Twitter to generate like headlines and news clips, etc. When Twitter has a lot of users. But how many people are in America that actually use Twitter? It's actually a very small percentage of Americans that are really
Right.
using and engaging with Twitter. Yeah, it's a huge platform and it makes a lot of money, but it's a huge platform in like kind of a niche
Yeah,
of
the
sorts.
internet's not that serious, guys.
Yeah, the internet's not that serious. It's not as big as you think it is.
Yeah,
Most of the people on the internet aren't real in like a sense
also
of
true.
like
They're Russian
broad
bots.
no. I mean they're not real in like these are people who are spending their time on the
They're fronting.
internet. It's
Yeah.
not your average like consensus of American politics.
I'm honestly the only honest person on the internet.
Well, me too.
Yeah, because I say hysterical things because I'm hysteric. You know. But yeah. No, you're totally right though.
Yeah, but it was amazing to me how much the news was relying on. And Donald Trump tweeted out, and everybody went fucking crazy on Twitter because of
Yeah,
it.
everyone shit and fart and came.
Yeah, and it's like
the Orange Boy did it.
The only reason that people aren't freaking out on Twitter about Joe Biden is because he doesn't tweet ever. That's it. He doesn't really tweet. He doesn't tweet his personal opinion really. He's got.
I mean, I think that's a over specific thing, but I think it is ultimately that.
No. It's part of like a greater thing, obviously. Of course.
He's.
But it's like the things that he's like, yeah, I don't know. We'll get into it more next week. I've got a thing that I've kind of been like working on and thinking about all this sort of stuff.
I mean, to be clear, we're on the same page and we agree on that. It's just
yes.
No, I think it's.
I didn't think we were adversarial in this point at all.
Well, I'm gonna beat you up.
Okay, well, you got to come over here first.
Man, I don't wanna.
Damn. All right.
I don't wanna. Yeah. So yeah. Anything
next
else?
week.
No,
I don't think we do.
I do, but I always do. But what's
I've had a crazy couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I've given up on the. Maybe I'll return to it someday. But the thing I was working on,
thing and everything.
What's that?
The Orwell.
Yeah, I've sort of given up on it. I mean, the reason why I've given up on it is because there's so much that I'm trying to dig into, and I don't think I can make it concise.
I understand.
but I am. I've started writing scripts for other standalone videos.
Nice.
More adjacent to things that I'm maybe more familiar with. I guess I don't know. We
can always do one of those like literature deep dives in one of these too. Like it's
sure. Yeah,
I figure it'll be fine.
So yeah, my news is lice cray cray, and I got burned out on the Orwell thing because the subject of like who is watching us is very deep.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people, and it sucks. But yeah, no, I think I would like to make more simplified videos on like electoralism and stuff like that. Things that I'm
good.
Yeah, things that I'm like really in tune with. Orwell and social media is like there's too much going on there, I think, for
exactly.
It would be like a several part like couple hour thing.
Yeah. And every time that we've talked about like Deleuze or Lacan or Freud or Marx in any one of these, like it always takes so long. Like you can't just sit down and be like, I'm going to explain Marx in an hour. It's not going to happen.
I was actually
you have to be more specific.
I was having a conversation with Cam.
My boy.
Yeah.
Goth Muslim Jesus. Bottom text without organs.
Yeah, bottom text without organs. Goth
Go
Muslim
follow
Jesus.
him.
Yeah, he made our intro music. We were talking the other day, and we were talking about how like memes can't really capture like a true politics of like anything. And at one point I said, yeah, actually I think memes can. And Marx just wrote all those extra pages because he was trying to fill a word count.
Yeah, that's true. He was being paid by the Atlantic to,
right. Yeah, he was just trying to hit a word count quota, and that's why Das Capital is what, like
so many volumes.
Yeah, it's like so many volumes of several hundred page
It's
books.
huge. Yeah, it's massive. I haven't. I have not read all of it.
No, nobody has.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, no.
I've only and being completely honest here, I've only ever read summaries of these things. Read summaries and
God
watched
bless.
summaries of these works because
Yeah.
I
Who has time for that apart
touch
from people that went
grass.
to school for it? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so my pitch is my videos are dying, but will be reborn anew. What's your pitch, Danko?
Next week, the reason that our podcast is going to come out on a different day, or maybe be recorded earlier, come out the same day, and no one will know, is because I'm going back. It's going to be my third appearance on Bringing Down the Grindhouse, which is a great horror-themed podcast. I've gone on to talk about, we talked about Lacanian psychoanalysis in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was the first one. The second one, I spoke about theory fiction and Nick Land. And this time I'm coming over there to talk about feminism, capitalism, and witchcraft. So that'll be fun as shit. I'm going to be recording that. It'll probably take a couple weeks because they actually edit it like cowards.
Yeah.
But so it'll be a couple weeks before it really comes out. But maybe we'll try to like line something up because we lined up the last one where we did like an accelerationism deep dive that people really liked when they did the Nick Land one. So they came out at the same time. So maybe we'll do something similar. But that's what I'm doing next week. You guys should go follow them. It's been I forget exactly what the handle is, but just look up Bring Down the Grindhouse.
Yeah, BDG.
BDTGH.
Yeah, that one.
Podcast. Yeah. They're great. I know everyone on the podcast. They're all really cool people, except for one of them, and I'll let you decide who.
It's you.
That's a joke. Yeah, it is actually me, even though I'm not like officially on.
You know, you should make the case that they should have me on sometime because they
haven't they talked to you about that? I think
they've talked to me. Yeah. They've talked to me about it, but they've never actually said anything.
Honestly, we should both go on and just take over because I already feel like I'm like doming everyone on the podcast when I go over there. So you and I would do it, baby. Anyway, but yeah, so I'm going on there. It'll rule. Check them out if you like horror media of any sort. They're really great. Yeah, I think that's more or less it. Also go to my workshop's Patreon. We're still doing that. It's patreon.com/Truncata, TRUNCATA. We're continuing we just did a bunch of stuff on translation. We're going over some like performance art and paintings right now. It's been fun. We've also kind of changed things up a little bit. So we're doing more themes than we did before. So things are a little bit more flexible and kind of change a lot more so I keep them more interesting. I had to take a little bit of a break from recording lectures because I started this new job and my life has been insane, just like, you know, everyone else here, it seems like. But those are coming back this week. So awesome. God bless. What's up, John?
G bless. John, you got anything to pitch?
No, not at the moment.
I got something you can pitch.
Ooh, is it detent in your pants?
You should show your shirt. I saw it earlier. Very impressive.
It's very what now?
It's very impressive.
Oh yeah.
Jurassic Park. Bury the rod.
Yeah, and then turn around.
Jurassic Cock.
Jurassic Cock. Very nice.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I really thought it was going to say spare the child, but no, it's a penis thing.
Bury the rod, spare the child. Jesus. That's not the right.
Yeah.
Making child abuse kitschy.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you for your time this evening. Listener, thank you also for your time. We hope you enjoyed our return to recording. As always, please take your medicine.
Please take mine too.
And make sure to share with your friends.
Hi, Michael Deebs here, with no gun pointed at my head. Please know that all content created for the Benzo Rehab Dungeon is and always will be freely available. However, if you would like to support this creation of content, we here at Camp Benzo would appreciate it, as the production itself is not free of cost. Anything donated will go to covering the various subscription fees maintained for content production or improving and expanding the content produced. If you are able to, please head on over to patreon.com/BenzoRehabDungeon. We also have shirts for sale on Teespring, all priced as low as we can get them without turning much or any profit. They are mostly so that you can show your loved ones that a necessary intervention may be on the horizon. Links to the merchandise storefront and our various social media profiles can be found on our link tree, which is the word linktr.ee/BenzoRehabDungeon. As always, we love you. Please take your medicine.